story. See me. That's it. Crash. Mortimer and I stood at the entrance to the temple. The candle just beyond the transparent threshold burned, ever present. It appeared to flicker each time the threshold shimmered, making its presence visible for a second. Mortimer barked as a tall figure, translucent, strode to the threshold. He stopped and smiled at us before transforming into a ginger cat. Hamish walked through the barrier silently and went straight over to Mortimer. Mortimer grinned and licked Hamish, almost knocking him off his feet. Hamish smiled. He came over to me and circled my legs. I bent down and patted his back. "Hello, old friend," I said. Hamish looked up at me. Reaching up on his hind legs, his paws took my hands. "How was it beyond the veil?" Hamish watched my eyes. I smiled. He will never reveal what is beyond that threshold. Neither he or Mortimer ever talk about it. Hamish followed Mortimer to the concrete steps that led down into the house. I glanced at the threshold and went to the steps. "Not your time, guardian of this house," a female voice said. I looked at the threshold, but it was no longer transparent. Rather, it looked like an ordinary grey wall. Solid. I went downstairs. Hamish was perched on the arm of my chair. Mortimer was in his usual spot, the rug next to the fireplace. "You retrieve our waiting room guest. Mortimer and I will head into the forest to find the will-o'-the-wisp." Hamish nodded. He leapt off the chair and darted out of the lounge. Mortimer stood up and walked ahead of me to the front door. I opened the door to reveal the ocean of the black mist. It coiled and twisted as if anticipating us. Mortimer looked up at me. "I know," I said. "Once a wisp finds a forest, it's reluctant to leave. I don't want him upsetting the dwellers there. You do recall what happened last time." Mortimer walked into the black mist. It dispersed, allowing us to see the ground, and closed behind us, concealing our direction. We walked for a long period, and still there was no end to it. The ground was uneven, and it was getting steeper. Mortimer and I kept walking on and on. We kept a constant pace, higher and higher. We hiked until the black mist thinned. The ground became more visible, and we reached the peak of the valley. I looked back. The house was no longer in view. Mortimer sniffed the air. Deep below was the decline of a mountain that opened into two large chasms. One was totally dark. Through the other, I could see markings of a forest with black trees. They shifted and twisted as if gesturing to each other. Mortimer watched a faint bluish-green light floating amongst the trees. I shook my head. "We should go and retrieve him before he gets devoured." Mortimer led the way through the chasm. Passing through another threshold, we were in the forest. The trees turned to us. Crack! Spiky thorns burst out of their branches as if antagonized. Claws cut the air, trying to reach us. They shrieked. A howl filled the air, but it was not from a wolf. A winged creature darted amongst the treetops, connecting the sky to the forest. This was not a safe place. Not even for me. Mortimer pushed on, and I followed as we made our way towards a bluish-green speck floating amongst the trees. Zip! A tree took a swipe at it, but missed. Mortimer growled. He dashed towards the will-o'-the-wisp that darted in the opposite direction. I kept up as he dashed around trees. Up, down, left, up, right, circling around another tree. I retreated, disappearing into the forest. Will-o'-the-wisp zipped again, speeding up. It fled back the way it came. Mortimer stood there, cutting off its root. The sound boomed across the forest. The wisp zipped again, ducking an oncoming branch. It flashed down a gentle decline. Too late. I waited ahead at the end with cupped palms. I caught it, closing my palms around it. I looked at the face on the wisp in my palms. It looked worried. This is not a forest for you. I closed my palms around it as Mortimer trotted to my side. Trees quietened. Dead, still, silent. Not good, I thought to myself. Amongst them, sets of green eyes appeared everywhere. The creatures roared. Mortimer's effulgence blasted out, creating a dome around us. We moved rapidly back towards the chasm. Flap of wings was heard. The creature's talon ripped at the sphere from above, trying to reach us. Rip, scratch, rip. I looked up at its gnashing teeth as it tried again and again. Go home and take this one with you, I said. Mortimer looked up at me. I'll be fine. Besides, I could do with some practice. I opened my palm. The wisp floated out, his little face terrified. Mortimer trotted on, his effulgence only covering him and the tiny wisp beside him. The second I passed from his effulgence, hurt and fear washed over me. This place is filled with sorrow, and he was hitting me in waves. Stay here too long, and it could weaken me. The winged creature dived at me. I ran, weaving my index finger in a circular motion. Atoms and particles formed together, glowing ice blue as I said a silent prayer. Shoot, I pointed my finger at the creature. Slam, I released a bolt. Rip. It speared the winged creature dead center and passed right through it, illuminating the forest behind it for a few seconds. I stood and watched as the creature fell. Crash, crushed two trees that still clawed at it as they lay under it. Green eyes closed in on me from all around. They belonged to ape-like figures with a Kodiak bear's heightened muzzle. Ooh. More came as if they blinked into existence. Bushes rustled, twigs snapped. Animalistic roars accompanied the thudding of hoof feet on the forest bed. I smiled at the roar coming from amongst them. I've not been in a proper fight in eons. I remained still, focusing, digging deep, touching the rage within me. I clasped it. Surge, it flowed through me, rising, and then I opened my eyes. All three of them. My third eye appeared at the center of my forehead. A flame emitted from it, radiating a steel blue sphere around me. The ape-like beasts stopped in their tracks. They cowered as the sphere expanded. Trees shifted back, holding their claws. As the sphere enlarged, larger, larger, it reached the first set of trees, incinerating them instantly. One ape-like beast touched it. Its arm burnt to a crisp in seconds. Ooh. It screamed, creating a stampede that thudded away from me, crushing anything in its path. My flame grew larger. Guardian! I extended my sphere, incinerating more forest as rage surfaced within me. It burned everything. It was as if the sun touched this place for an instant. Guardian! A voice boomed again. I stopped, calming. I looked up at the Divine Mother in the sky above the forest. Go back to the house, she said. I closed my eyes. Thoughts of my time with Keely ensheathed them, calmed me. Slowly, the rage decreased. The forest was dark again. As you wish, Divine Mother. I placed my right hand on my heart and gave a gentle nod. Turning, I strode through the chasm. I got back to my lounge to find Mortimer asleep on his rug, and a disheveled man in an anorak and jeans slouched in the armchair. He looked like he slept in his car, his face terrified, just like it was when he was in the form of a wisp. I'm sorry, I got distracted, and then I got lost. I was meaning to come here, but I didn't know how, Jude said. Don't suppose Calvin is here. Could I see him, just once, please? I watched Jude. He reminded me of an ex-junkie. The need is gone, but the mannerisms remain. He's not here, I said. Shame. You know I got him back. I spent months in my car tracking down what happened to him. It was my fault. It was. I should have been there to pick him up from school. By the time Lou got there, Calvin was missing. That changed it for me. I looked for him everywhere. Police couldn't do much, but I kept at it. I got leads off a private investigator, and when I ran out of money, I sold my condo in Ontario. Lou was gone by then, so I didn't really need it anyway. Still didn't want to sell it though. So home. Jude wiped his eyes. Can't really blame her, you know. How do you get back from? I didn't pick up our son from school because I had too many bevies and fell asleep. Jude looked at the flames in the fireplace. Mortimer did not stir, but he was listening. Took me a year and a bit, but I finally found him. He was 2 and a bit hours from our condo. Before I sold it, that is. Got the police involved straight away. Tears streamed down Jude's cheeks. Well, they would have if they were there. Calvin didn't recognize me. Too young to remember his dad, I guess. But he remembered Lou straight away. She stayed with him in the hospital. Doctor said he was in good health, considering. The woman who took him had lost her son. She never really got over that, so she took Calvin. She treated him like her own. All the stories you hear these days could have been much worse. Must admit, I did think about what was happening to him. Didn't like it one bit. I tried not to, but it kept coming into my mind. Thank God he was okay for the most part. Hamish trotted down to the doorway. I looked at him. He nodded and came over and perched up on my armchair. Mortimer got up, looked at Hamish, circled around on his rug and sat back down again, head on paws, eyes closed. Jude smiled at Hamish. We were thinking of getting one. I had it all figured out as I was driving to our hotel. Now that Calvin was back with us, Lou would want to get back together with me and we could be a family again. Even get a cat. She wanted to get one, but I didn't want to. Too much upkeep. It was all going to plan, and then in her hotel room, she handed me divorce papers. Job done. Now I got Calvin back. She didn't want a bar of me. No, that's not true. She left me when I lost him. I could see it in her. That was the end. I could see Calvin whenever I wanted, she promised. Trying to make it up to me. But I lost everything I had, and it was my fault. We got ready. It was time to go hospital to see our son. Lou drove. We were just driving along. Slam, a car rammed into us. Jude looked at his jacket. It's the same one I was wearing when it happened. Not seeing Lou after that, but I kept looking for Calvin. Somehow winded up in a forest. I kept getting turned around in there. I'd see bright lights on the road, cars driving by. I'd go towards them. Just wanted to touch them. Whack, the driver steered straight into a tree. Crash. He flew out of his windscreen and ended up on a tree branch. I floated back into the forest until the next set of headlights came my way. It was really easy. I liked the lights. I wanted to see them again desperately. All I did was veer towards them. They'd be confused and swerve. If I was really lucky, they'd crash into a tree and fly out the windscreen again like the first guy. Jude looked at the flames in the fireplace. Just like that, it was beautiful. I kept doing it. It made me feel good. It was fun. I made these people carrier swerve off the road. It went straight into a ravine. It was hilarious. I was on my way back to the forest when I heard crying. I went down there. The baby boy stopped crying when he saw me. His mum was dead in the driver's seat. So was the older kid next to the little boy. This boy was looking at me. Me just being there comforted him. And then I heard his name. Calvin. The little boy reminded me that I had a little boy too. I was a dad. I stayed with the baby boy until the paramedics came, and then I went to find my son. I had done it before. I could find Calvin again. Jude wiped his eyes. only there were no tears. I kept moving, looking, but I got turned around again in the forest. I flitted around, kept looking, moving from one forest to the next. But I always ended up veering cars off the road every so often. I'd get distracted. I'd see a kid, think of Calvin, so I'd set out again. That's how I ended up in that forest back there. Hamish jumped down onto the floor. Jude jumped, pulling his legs back. Ooh, that was funny. Naughty cat, he said, keeping his eyes on Hamish, who left the lounge. Is Calvin here? He's not here, Jude, but there is someone I want you to meet. Keep in mind, it's a short visit. Oh, okay. Jude stood up. I gestured to the room across the hall. It had turned into a hotel room. Jude entered, followed by me. Hey, this looks just like the room me and Lou met in before we went to go and see Calvin. Calvin, my son. I was looking for him, and I found him. I think. Hamish entered the waiting room, followed by a blonde woman, mid-30s, hair tied in a ponytail, and in a floral dress to her knees. She oozed gentleness. Jude, she said. Jude turned around to look at her. His eyes remained fixed on her as if calculating what's going on. Lou? Lou strode to Jude and hugged him. Jude sobbed. Only there were no tears, just sounds. She held him, letting him finish. Hamish and I stood in the doorway of this twin double-bed hotel room, complete with a sideboard and a tea point on it. Jude released his embrace. Lou guided him to the bed and they both sat down. I'm so sorry, Lou. I really am. I didn't mean to lose our son. I know. I forgive you, Jude. Please remember that. It's okay. Calvin is doing fine. Did you see him? I can't find him, Jude said. I keep an eye on him. He's working in IT and getting married this year. Could I see him, just once, please? Please, Lou? Lou looked over at us. Both Hamish and I kept our eyes on her. She cupped Jude's face in her hands and shook her head. Not now. Maybe later. She held his hands. What happens now, Lou? Guardian has permitted me to come and see you to remind you that you are forgiven. Please remember that. Remember that you are loved, Jude. Don't forget. Lou stood up. Lou, don't go. Jude stood up. She must, Jude. This is not the place for her, I said. Lou wiped tears from her eyes, and she followed Hamish out of the waiting room and then turned right. A second later, Mortimer appeared at the doorway. Well, what happens now? Jude said. Do you remember how many cars you forced off the road? Jude rubbed his pockets with his hands, smiling. Yeah, that was fun. Just seeing them lying there just like me. I was just lying there with a piece of glass sticking out my throat. I watched Lou take a last breath, then she flopped forward. That was the end of us. So why not send a few more the same way as us? It's not so bad. Look at me now, I'm okay. That's the issue, Jude. If you don't let go, irrespective of how much it hurts, you become destructive. External forces have to step in. I gestured to the waiting room arch. Jude walked out, stopping in front of Mortimer, who turned and led him down the corridor. Will there be cars there? Jude said. There will be others like you, and some much worse. Jude followed Mortimer down a flight of stairs. He turned left and stopped at the first door on the right. I strode to it and opened it. Inside, it led to a deep green forest, just like the ones you would see in Ontario, Canada. Jude smiled as we heard a car drive past in the distance. Ooh, cars. Love the lights on the cars, Jude said. I gave Jude a slight nod. Remember what Lou told you? Jude looked at me quizzically and then turned. formed into a will-o'-the-wisp and wafted deep into the forest. I shut the door. Jude had already forgotten what she had told him. He was lost in his last thought. His search for his son, Calvin. He was hurting, and he never let go of it until he realizes and accepted what happened and lets it go. He will remain trapped in that forest, floating towards headlamps. Hamish sauntered over to me. "Yeah, I'm coming." I strode up the stairs, followed by Mortimer. Hamish walked ahead. I did not want to keep the Divine Mother waiting any longer. I was in for a dressing down. You don't want to hear this, trust me, so I'll see you next Sunday at 11. Godspeed.